Good morning. I am Pauline Lucas, Policy Director at European Power, the association representing district heating and cooling. I am also co-chair of ENZA, the European Net Zero Alliance, and I have the pleasure today to welcome our audience and panelists for a webinar discussion on the EU Net Zero Act. If you are not familiar with ENZA, it is a coalition of 22 European associations representing economic and industrial sectors, from manufacturing to energy infrastructure, building and construction, mobility, agriculture, and different energy vectors, namely liquid and gaseous fuels, heat and cold, and electricity. And the alliance was born a few years ago from the commitment to deliver climate neutrality by 2050, based on a multi-energy approach combining sectors and energy vectors. Last March, the European Commission proposed the Net Zero Industry Act to strengthen the European manufacturing capacity and increase the competitiveness of net zero technologies. These technologies are key to deliver the Fit for 55 package and repower EU objectives, and ultimately to improve the EU's energy resilience. And ENZA is not only an homonym to the Commission's proposal, but its members are also the perfect illustration of the EU's ability to produce homegrown, competitive, clean energy technologies. Indeed, the EU is already the home to several flagship net zero technologies and solutions. We will see them today. And several of them are representing within ENZA, such as the production and use of hydrogen, solar thermal, carbon capture and storage, and sustainable energy, bioenergy, just to name a few. These technologies will continue delivering climate targets, strengthening the EU energy security, guaranteeing a cost-efficient transition for industries and for consumers. And during the next hour or so, ENZA members will offer their views on the proposal and ongoing discussions among the EU institutions. So with our panelists, we will touch upon the importance of a multi-energy approach within the context of the Net Zero Industry Act, and discuss the concept of strategic net zero technologies. But before diving in, a few elements of housekeeping. So the webinar will be recorded, or is recorded, and it will be available on ENZA's YouTube channel in the coming days. And of course, we are inviting the audience to submit the questions in the Q&A box. And the questions will be addressed after the panel. So to get the conversation started, our panelists are going to present their views on why the Net Zero Industry Act is important for the sector, how their technology, the technology they represent, is a net zero technology, and how the proposal from the Commission and the draft report from the European Parliament is addressing their concerns as a sector. I will now hand over to our first panelist, Pedro Diaz, who is a policy director at Solar Heat Europe. Pedro, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Pauline. So it's a pleasure to be addressing you this morning, a sunny morning in Brussels, and I hope you're enjoying the start of the summer. So I'm here to refer the perspective, to address the perspective of the solar heating and cooling sector. This is one of the important elements for the transition. It's recognized as one of the net zero technologies, and it has several important elements that make that this sector has to be recognized as a net zero industrial sector. One of them is that it's fully renewable, so fully reliant on solar energy to produce heat. So it's also very strongly based on a EU supply chain. So it's not requiring critical materials, The supply chain is mostly based in Europe, but it's not anyway depending on critical suppliers in terms of countries with whom we could have concerns about geostrategical issues. And one important aspect we need to refer, we're talking about also about the implementation of the European Green Deal, the question of circularity. But it's more than that. So at the same time, the European sector, so the European solar thermal industry, research institutes, universities are leading globally. So we've been leading in terms of new solutions, and we include there a photo of one of the innovative solutions in terms of solar panels or solar collectors from one of our members. But there are more. So this is Fresnel lenses, but there is also high vacuum flat plate collectors. We are also leading in the hybrid collectors, so the PVT, so that both PV and thermal, and also in terms of applications, so applications for industrial sectors. These are important factors that make it one of the elements already recognized in the Commission draft for the net zero industrial sectors. It's also an essential element for the energy transition, covering different types of demand. So the most known is the use of solar thermal for water heating. This is indeed the main segment. We're talking about Southern European countries, for instance, thermal siphons, where we have usual systems around 1.4, 2 kilowatt of thermal capacity that are used for water heating. But then we also find in other areas, namely in Central Europe, but not only, systems that are also residential, but also contributing for space heating. So, and these are also relevant, or water heating, but systems that are not only like the thermal siphons with the storage on the roof. This is indeed what is more commonly known, but our sector is also supplying large-scale systems, namely for district heating. And just to give you an example, in Denmark, there is over 1 gigawatt of solar thermal capacity connected to district heating networks. So these are very large systems, the largest of which is over 100 megawatt in size. It's also one of the potential areas of growth. So we need more district heating networks. We need also modern district heating networks, and we need to supply them with renewable energy. We've been doing that. We have a record number of systems of district heating or solar thermal for district heating in Germany. We have also countries like Netherlands now with a new plant of 30 megawatts. So things are moving on. And then we have another segment which has had an amazing growth, which is the use of solar thermal for industry. So just to give you an example, 4 years ago, the largest solar thermal system used for industry was 2 megawatts in size. Today we have under construction systems of 20 megawatts, for instance, in Croatia, or 30 megawatts for in Spain. So these used for industry, some using concentrating solar technologies, other using flat plate or collectors, just large size ones. So there is quite an important role. Heat is 50% of the energy demand. When we talk about our households in Europe, heating demands are over 70%. So just water heating represents 15% of the demand. So the energy transition needs solutions for heat, needs renewable heat, and we are part of that solution. And then we come to the importance of the ENZA. So we initially we saw ENZA as being too focused on sectors where Europe was very dependent on imports. But what we want to stress is that we have sectors like the solar thermal sector, which are well implemented around Europe, are already supplying most of the needs of the European market. So in our case, we are supplying over 90% of the demand for solar thermal equipment in Europe with EU manufactured equipment products. And on top of that, we are a net exporter sector. So we have around to north of Africa, even sub-Saharan Africa, but Latin America. So we have companies exporting. We have some countries like Greece and Austria that are exporting about 50% of their production. So, and even considering this, we supply 90% of the needs of the European market. ENZA needs to address also these sectors which have a strong implantation, which are growing and for which the demand will grow, so that we can keep leading the European supply, the supply of the European market. We can keep growing our exports. So this is an important factor, a message we want to give. Let's also look into those that are already well implanted in Europe. Let's also support them to grow, to face the growing demand, but also to get a stronger strategic position in Europe. We, as you can see, some examples there, and I just want to stress this to demystify what we think about solar energy. We use solar energy, as we used before, all over Europe, but we are also manufacturing all over Europe. And here we have examples of manufacturers in Finland, in Sweden. We have an example from Austria, which is the larger European manufacturers and one of the largest in the world. So we have good examples, and we also need to take those good examples into account and support, not only looking into the sectors where we are in a difficult situation and a difficult global competition context. So to cover the full range, because for the energy transition, and this is one of the things that is clear also today, clearer than it was maybe 1 year ago, we need to address all the different solutions we need. We need a combination of solutions to really reduce our dependency in terms of energy supply from critical countries, but also in terms of equipment or component supply. So that's it for the moment. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Pedro, for this very clear messages. I will now hand over to Alexandra Tudoroiu, Head of Policy at Cogen Europe, representing the combined heat and power plant sector.
Thank you, Pauline. So indeed, I represent the cogeneration sector. This is an established net zero technology and a sector that has a very strong footprint in Europe and a strong manufacturing base. More than 50% of CHP installed in Europe is produced in the EU. And similar to the solar heat sector, we are also exporting, Europe is exporting cogeneration solutions all over the world. The cogeneration sector generates more than 100,000 direct jobs, but it also has a strong supply chain, which consists of distributors and installers, and it's generating much more indirect jobs in the industries where it is used, as well as downstream and upstream. So first of all, what cogeneration is, for those who are not familiar with this solution, it's an energy efficiency solution, which uses one energy source or one fuel to produce two outputs. heat and power. And it's really fuel neutral. This is why we say that cogeneration is ready for the move to net zero emissions. It can easily transition to renewable sources like biomass, biogases, biomethane, renewable hydrogen. I think it can even run on solar thermal energy or geothermal energy in some applications. And it's really complementary to other renewable energy solutions like PV and wind. And also increasingly, it's becoming an energy system integrator. In terms of its applications, it also has a wide range of applications. It supports the net zero journey and competitiveness of key European industries, from the chemical sector to the pulp and paper sectors. Food processors are using CHP because they need a lot of both heat and electricity in their industrial processes. The ceramics industry, hospitality as well. And it's an important heat source for district heating, SMEs, as well as domestic consumers. We're seeing more and more innovation in the cogeneration sector across Europe, which is an essential part of energy systems integration. So we don't see CHP as the solution, but rather an enabling technology that combines very well with heat pumps, that combines very well and complements PV and wind, and that delivers system efficiency across local energy systems. And you can see here in this picture an example of that. You can have a CHP combined with a heat pump in district heating, and they will be optimized in such a way that more renewable energy is used for heat and power production. You can have a CHP used in industry as well, and you can have CHPs more and more installed in buildings. And these are just a few examples of how the sector is innovating. We see, for instance, in the agricultural sector, biogas-based CHPs, where biogas is used to its maximum capacity, or the use of biogas maximized to produce heat and power. It is the case for Auchan Energy in Belgium, where biogas is produced from agricultural waste. The CHP uses this biogas to produce heat for the farm, for the biogas production itself, so quite circular. And there's a small district heating that distributes the leftover heat nearby. And then the renewable electricity produced is also delivered to the grid for extra revenues for the farm. Then we have some examples of hydrogen-based CHPs. We see the technology evolving quite rapidly with CHPs that can run between flexibly between 0 and 100% renewable hydrogen. And this hydrogen is generally produced locally from excess PV and wind. And then the heat is again delivered through district heating or to industries nearby. And the electricity is used to actually balance the grid. So we have all these examples which show that cogeneration is really vital to reach net zero by 2050. And it's also important today to actually lower emission as much as possible and ensure that we stay within our carbon budget. When it comes to the Net Zero Industry Act, we very much welcome this initiative because it gives visibility to EU's industrial leadership in the field of net zero technologies. Looking through the proposal by the European Commission, we see that energy efficiency is highlighted, that energy system integration is very much promoted as well. However, we also see some weaknesses. There's a patchy overview of net zero technologies, so cherry picking of very specific technologies that are supposed to be promoted. High efficiency cogeneration and district heating even are not mentioned specifically. So we think that's one of the weaknesses, that those technologies that are left out will not get the visibility that is required for the sectors to be retained in Europe and to grow in Europe. And then what we also worry about is that the end use side of the net zero transition is also excluded from the scope of the Net Zero Industry Act. And we see quite a lot of large-scale projects in industry, in district heating, which could really benefit from support. They could really benefit from permitting, easier permitting, and that should really be covered as well. So this leads to our recommendations to include all net zero energy efficient and renewable energy solution in the scope of the Net Zero Industry Act, to define and promote net zero end use projects, and to also foster synergies between net zero technologies as part of integrated energy systems, just to better reap the benefits of all these technologies and the complementarities between them. So yeah, that's our key points for this discussion.
Thanks a lot, Alexandra. Yes, I think it's important also to point out also why ENZA even exists, this multi-energy and system integration approach. So thanks for that. I will now hand over to Jean-Marc Jossard, who is Secretary General at Bioenergy Europe. Jean-Marc, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Pauline. In a few minutes as well, some messages from that are aligned with the previous speakers, by the way. But the first one is to show you how our imports are influencing the energy consumption. Now you see on this graph, if you take the left column, oil, so we are producing in Europe 22 million ton oil equivalent oil and using 500. So our dependency is 95%. For natural gas, our dependency is 84%. This was done some time ago, before the war, but the logic and the fundamentally is the same message. For gas, we are depending on by 40% on external sources, and for biomass between 3-4%. So biomass comes from Europe. A second message from this graph is that, contrary to what many people think or they ignore it, biomass is the first indigenous resources in Europe. So in terms of geopolitical advantage, this is one solid basis to reinforce our security of supply of energy in Europe. Second statement is the fact that just like solar thermal and CHP technologies, our technology suppliers are based in Europe. We made, for example, a very simple calculation out of a directory. There are for any technologies databases of technology suppliers. We just took one of 500 large and medium scale suppliers in Europe, and we discovered that 70% of them are based in Europe and only 7% in China, for example, which is not the case for all technologies for sure. So biomass comes from Europe and the technology suppliers are based in Europe. So it's a kind of obvious conclusion that Bioenergy should be part of the solution. Part of the solution for what? For energy. You see that here in the inner circle, the energy that we are consuming. You all know now, hopefully, that half of our energy is used for heating and cooling, about a quarter for electricity, a quarter for transport. So, and you see on the outer pie, let's say, that Bioenergy is really a key solution for the heating sector. This is a traditional use of Bioenergy. Now this is modern, efficient, and low emission. And in fact, most of our energy goes to the heat. It's still widely covered by non-renewable, by fossil fuels that have to be really displaced, and the heating sector remains the big challenge, both for the domestic sector or for the industrial sector. And for the district heating sectors, for the industrial sector, the advantage of Bioenergy is that we can produce also high temperature heat in the form of steam, for example. And this is really a reliable source as well for the energy supply. So in 3 slides, I can cover all Bioenergy aspects, but there are a few assets. We are renewable, we are carbon neutral, we are a storable source of energy that can really match the intermittency of some other renewables, so it's a perfect combination. We are providing a lot of job because our fuel needs to be procured. So we have a lot of job in the fuel procurement, which is also an advantage because this has some cost. But in terms of rural area development, for example, this is really a key advantage. As I mentioned, we are indigenous and manufacture in the EU. And if I make the link with the ENZA, we were a bit disappointed that we were not listed as a priority for ENZA. And I share the views as well of the others that it's not just that we should try to reshore some industry that we have lost in the past. It's also reinforcing the existing technology and companies. And for Bioenergy as well, we are even exporting our technologies outside Europe, and we need to make our market strong so that we keep this leadership in the future. I'm open to any questions on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Jean-Marc. I guess also echoing the messages of the previous speakers, as in let's look into sectors that are already well implanted in the EU and homegrown. I will now hand over to Małgosia Rybak, who is Climate Change and Energy Director at CEPI. And CEPI is the European Association representing the paper industry. Małgosia, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Pauline. And it's not by accident that we're coming last as an industry. We're one of the end users of all those technologies that were presented just before my presentation, and also some of the technologies that are listed in the Commission's proposal. But let me start with explaining why we decided to join ENZA, but also decided to present today and talk to you a little bit about the end user's perspective. Our industry, producing pulp and paper, is one of the largest industrial generator and user of renewable energy. Already now, more than 60% of our primary energy use is met by biomass that is sustainable, coming from our forestry operations or from the waste and residues of paper making. This means that already today, our industry is benefiting from net zero technologies. What is interesting is that when we look at our industry and our industrial sites, there is a even more potential for us to deliver renewable energy. And while one of our core policy asks is to have access to affordable clean energy, this means that we really welcome the Commission's proposal to make sure that there is an industrial base that can provide those technologies that enable the production of fossil-free energy. We also see that we will need those technologies on site. So whenever this is PVs or solar thermal, whether it's biogas production on site, this is something that we can use to also decarbonize our production and provide more renewable energy. And by energy, we mean both electricity and heat. And this is something that we can use for our own industrial production, but this is how we can integrate further with the energy system. Already today, our industrial sites are providing renewable heat for district heating, or are able to provide renewable heat for nearby industrial production. We have examples across Europe looking at nearby cities and providing them with 100% heat, but also providing heat for public swimming pools, or providing heat for offices, for nearby industrial installations as well. And here, the reason why we're talking about ENZA is that there is a significant part missing from the proposal, meaning that the enabling policies, such as speeding up the permitting process, is only available for those that produce the technologies, but not for the end users. So here there is a gap between growing supply of technologies and making sure that there is a market for the deployment of the technologies. And when we look at the last 2 years, and this is what we did with our publication Reinvest 2050, it's been nothing but challenging, but still the industry has delivered projects, and we have a list of 15 projects across Europe that deliver decarbonization. And here is just a snapshot of some of those technologies and how are they being implemented right now for the decarbonization. And the permitting process is one of the hurdles that we need to overcome in order to be able to install, for example, new and more efficient CHP installations on our premises, in order for us to be able to install PV panels or thermal panels on our rooftop, in order for our installations to be able to produce biogas on site that could be used to replace some of our natural gas consumption, but also could be used to decarbonize other sectors, such as transport, so using Bioenergy for trucks. And here I'm going just to echo some of the messages that we heard before when it comes to address the oversight from the proposal, which means that while we're trying to grow this industrial base to provide technologies in Europe, we also need to make sure that the end users, and especially energy intensive end users, can benefit from faster permitting processes and from the support of policy, so that we can meet the supply that the Commission is targeting with the demand that is growing on the industrial sites. And with that, I think that we're going to move on to the discussion with the panelists, right?
Exactly. Thanks, Małgosia, for your presentation and for this smooth transition. So thanks actually to all panelists for already setting the scenes and bringing some important arguments into the net zero picture. So we know that in order to be effective, the Net Zero Industry Act, and also for it to achieve its purpose, ENZA members supports the idea of being more inclusive and taking the needs of all sectors that can deliver the 2050 objective into account. And within this text, we know that the net zero technologies are a central concept. So from your perspective, how should we define the strategic net zero technologies? We know that in the Commission's proposal, there is a list. The Parliament has on their end, the MEP Eller puts a broader, more encompassing definition following taxonomy. We know that this is also not unanimous within the ITRE committee. So what is your take on this? What is the best way of defining the strategic concept? I don't know who wants to jump in first. Any volunteer to break the ice and tackle this quite a challenging question? Jean-Marc, you want to go first?
Why not? Indeed, we saw this this proposal for the taxonomy, but we have doubts that this can bring a real solution. As you know, the taxonomy was designed for sustainable finance and for the purpose of the ENZA, it makes it even more complicated. It's a bit unclear. It's an indirect legislation for biomass. Again, not all the value chain is included. For example, the service to the end users are not included, so which is also very strange. So we would prefer, for example, that for renewables, the Renewable Energy Directive would be the reference, which is much more inclusive than the taxonomy. That is not fit for purpose in this case at all.
Thanks, Jean-Marc. So we have some alternative proposal on the table with the red. Any of you wants to add to this? Alexandra, go ahead.
Yes. Well, indeed, we either, if we include the list, we either include all technologies or then we stick with principles. So we broadly define net zero technologies as those technologies that are either renewable, energy efficient, that reduce CO2. So I would agree with Jean-Marc that we need to go back to the basic or fundamental legislation. So for cogeneration in particular and district heating as well, I would argue that the Energy Efficiency Directive is a better reference than taxonomy itself. Both the Renewable Energy Directive and the Energy Efficiency Directive have a long track record of impact assessments. Also, member states are used to those methodologies that are there to actually certify that the technology is energy efficient or that it's renewable and it qualifies as, for instance, sustainable, what is sustainable biomass and so on. So I would say that we need a broad definition and we need references to impact assessed or thoroughly impact assessed legislation that link to specific technologies.
Thanks, Alexandra. So two different alternatives. So on the one hand, the Renewable Energy Directive or the Energy Efficiency Directive, so well-established methodologies. Other panelists wants to chip in as for their preferred way of tackling this concept. If not, yeah, Pedro. Okay.
No, I think it was already referred. We understand from the Parliament report, the draft report, and we understand also the idea of Rapporteur Eller to try to use already an existing framework and not to extend to a different group or list, as we want to call it. But at the same time, the specificity and the size of the challenge and specificity of the challenge, which is to grow the industrial capacity in Europe, has its own requirements. The urgency and that we need to do it also needs to consider that, and the fact that we are looking into a broader process of energy transition. So just starting as finishing as I started. So understanding this idea to simplify, not to multiply with different concepts. The fact is that we need to take into account the specificity of the pieces and in this concrete piece, and how to better address it. Is it with the references that were also mentioned, Renewable Directive and Efficiency Directive, a specific list as the Commission was proposing, that could be revised and enlarged as some suggested today. There are different alternatives there, but it's good and it's important to continue this discussion to see what is fit for purpose.
Thanks, Pedro. Maybe some of you, actually most of you, pointed out the need to not only address a specific solution or technology, but address the entire value chain. And there was actually an interesting addition in the draft report of MEP Eller, which is the strategic net zero valleys that are broadening actually a little bit the initial concept of strategic projects. So in your opinion, does this help at least partly solving the issue of inclusiveness of value chain, or perhaps even a little bit touching upon the end user dimension that Magosha, you raised in your intervention?
I think that in general, the struggle that we have with this proposal is that the idea in itself is something that I think we can all support to grow this industrial base to produce the technologies in Europe. However, the technicality of it and how prescriptive it is with trying to come up with the new definitions, with the new lists, it really goes against removing hurdles. What we're struggling right now is building new hurdles. And while we went through the entire debate on the Fit for 55 files, we're seeing now that while we have the new targets for energy efficiency, new targets for renewable energy, new targets for GHG emission reductions, we're now coming up with new targets for the production in Europe. So it seems like instead of creating more space and more simplification to accelerate, we're creating new legislation and new hurdles that on the ground people will need to try to understand and try to put in practice. And instead of saving time and really put ourselves into action, we're going to lose time to make sure that we understand what we can benefit from, how we understand the new definition of strategic projects, strategic value chains. These concepts already exist if you look at the EU funding, for example, and how this is being done. And in the big scheme of things, also, while you put the list of different technologies, you're also slow down innovation, because whatever we're going to need to reach 2050 targets, most probably doesn't exist now. And while we're going to try to build the industrial base for the technologies that we already know, we're somehow closing a little bit the doors for innovation at the same time. So there are multiple problems when it comes to having prescriptive lists. And I think that other panelists already echoed a little bit the fact that we need simplicity and we need broader definition, because at the end of the day, we will need all technologies that can deliver net zero.
Thanks, Gosha. I think this is summarizing a little bit the needs and the approach that ENZA and its members are carrying. Pedro, you want to comment on that or further develop the argument?
Yes, one of the points I referred before was also the question of the SMEs. One of the concerns we had with the proposal, with the original proposal, and specifically the projects that as you were referring, is if they will be the suitability of these channeling resources of these, including SMEs in the process, and we'd like to alert to the difficulty that is many times to engage SMEs, because they are not as visible as they are much more dispersed, obviously, but they are critical for the industrial capacity in Europe, are critical for the energy transition. We all know that. One example are is the use of the recovery funds. So we have exceptional amounts that are being channeled to promote the economic recovery. But in many countries, not to say all, there is a lack of capacity to manage these funds. And then it's much easier to channel these funds to very large investments, which are usually done by very large companies, because that allows for the distribution of a very large amount with relatively low administrative burden. But if we want to get this into the economy, to SMEs and so on, this has a higher administrative burden, and in general, countries are not able to do that. And the ENZA and the question of the valleys is interesting, does not by itself answer this problem. We need to make sure that we are involving also SMEs, that their capacity in terms of innovation, in terms of the dynamism also that they bring to the economy, to new solutions and so on, is enhanced and is utilized in this context of growing our industrial capacity in these sectors.
And how do you see? Thanks for this comment. How do you see the ENZA helping these SMEs tapping into the various EU funds or the one that would be created, like the sovereignty fund, for instance? Mm-hmm. How can we make sure that not only larger companies are able to tap into it?
There are different issues that need to be tackled. One of them also refers to the funds that are available within ENZA. So we see in general repurposing of available funds. So we also need to be clear how are we how much resources and how much capacity are we putting into these challenges. But on the other side, it depends a lot on the national level, and of course that there is let's say a motivating role that the Commission can play. There are governance aspects to this, which is another question we might have about the regulation. So how the governance will work and operate, but mostly will be in terms of ensuring that there is the capacity at national level to identify the challenges, to identify the potential of the different solutions in their territory, and to ensure that there is the technical capacity, the administrative capacity within the concerned agencies to involve these sectors, involving also the different associations representing SMEs for different sectors in the countries, but also involving local authorities, so the local powers. We see a huge gap between the national authorities and the local level. And when we're talking about mobilizing economic actors, when we talk also about doing the overall energy transition, the local level is essential. So for mobilizing economic actors to bring the perspective of what are the challenges for the energy transition in a decentralized level, we need to create a strong bridge between national and local. So there are a number of instruments, and they are more than the ones I have referred, but the focus has to be there. So there is much more discussion that is needed, much more debate with different stakeholders to understand how we do that, and that we don't just take the shortcuts and the easy routes, which is to distribute huge amounts to a small number of initiatives.
Thanks, Pedro. Does anyone want to add to this?
Yes, but that would be just to echo Pedro's concerns. I think that we all share it in a different way when it comes to capacities on both sides. So on the side of SMEs and the industry to be able to apply, for example, for new funds already. Now we already see with the research and development or innovation funds, it is a challenge too big for SMEs to be able to consider applying for those kind of funds. And on the other side, we also see at the national level challenges when it comes to capacity and simply having enough people in the administration to deal with the permits and granting the permits. So while I think that there is a lot of optimism when it comes to different associations and different industries, we also see the challenges and simple practicalities.
That actually, oh, okay, Alexandra, yes, go first.
Yeah, maybe very quickly on the net zero valleys concept. We would be happy to support that if it actually did include the end users of the net zero technologies and this idea of system integration. But as far as we understand it, it is still pretty much limited to manufacturing and maybe some of the upstream to the manufacturer. But I would agree that we have to think about multipliers. So the manufacturer will be linked to the distributors at national and local level, but also the large end users like the pulp and paper industry or district heating sector can act as multipliers because they are linked to installers and ESCOs, for instance, that are generally more or less SMEs. So we have to think of those actors in the whole supply chain, which are multipliers and can really empower upstream or downstream SMEs and also create an environment for growing skills and also creating jobs.
Thanks, Alexandra. You actually preempted my next question. So we know that this year is the European Years of Skills, and of course the Commission recognizes the importance of this dimension in terms of innovation, competitiveness, and in particular also bouncing from the previous question for SMEs. So there are some provisions already in the Net Zero Industry Act that are addressing skills, but I wanted to also hear from you on this aspect. Do you think it's enough? What more can be done, or what can be done more efficiently within the text to address this skill issue?
I'm tempted to intervene, but I don't want to monopolize the discussion. The part of skills is a critical one. So the ENZA is focusing more on the supply side. But we and when we look into the skills challenge, we also need to look to the demand side and the capacity to deploy faster these technologies. This is an essential condition also to the growth of these sectors, and as we said before, the growth of the industrial capacity in Europe, but also of the European markets, puts European companies in a stronger competitiveness stance at global level. So for any industry, if there is a good deployment in their own market, and here we talk about the common markets, the more capacity and the more resources they will have to innovate and then to extend to other markets and to bring these advances to other markets. So when we talk about growing our industrial capacities, is very much connected with the deployment in the European market. One of the important things are the signals that have to be given, strong and clear signals about the future. There is a myriad of players intervening in this sector, because we have the formal education, we have non-formal education contexts also, we have what can be done by companies themselves. We need to mobilize all these agents. And for that, one first step is to give a clear signal. What is the direction? Where is the future? And what are the careers of the future, the opportunities of the future, and which are not, by the way. Then to create also the let's say the mechanisms to operate this change. This is not only about ENZA. This is a general approach that we need to see as part of the European Green Deal, of creating a development in the as foreseen in the European Green Deal, in terms of climate and in terms of digitalization, so on. So these things combine and go together. So they are different pieces of the puzzle. So signal is important, mobilizing actors, motivating them and giving them the instruments is the following step, and identifying the different needs. And for that, we would like to highlight that was launched last week, the initiative in terms of the Pact for Skills for Renewable Technologies. We are also involved, and we really welcome this initiative, because we need this joint work from the industry and the cooperation also with the European and national authorities to bring this to fruition. It's a huge task we have in front of us, but it will be a very rewarding one, where it will be preparing the European skill sets, the European workforce for the challenges of the future. So it's a huge jump that has to be done. So I think it's in general in the right direction. The message in regards to ENZA is that of course ENZA is mostly focused on the supply side, on the manufacturing capacity, but this is one of the aspects where manufacturing and deployment, so supply and demand side, go hand in hand.
Thanks, Pedro. Anything from the end of the other panelists on skills, or the needs that need to be addressed, or something you experience from the perspective of your own sector, perhaps? If not, I still engage our audience to post some questions. But I have another question on my end. So we know that the Net Zero Industry Act was drafted in response to the American Inflation Reduction Act. So I wanted to ask you, how actually does it compare to its American counterpart? Jean-Marc, yes, go ahead.
I haven't said much so far, so it's interesting indeed to know, in fact, that the ENZA was a kind of reaction, quickly drafted by the Commission in 1 month, I heard, as a reaction to the Inflation Reduction Act. And in a different way, indeed. For me, there are 2-3 important points. It's the budget behind. The Inflation Reduction Act comes with something like almost $500 billion support in terms of tax incentives, subsidies. And that makes a difference, because we in the bioenergy sector, companies that are putting projects on hold in Europe and they are investing in the US only because of the subsidies. In Europe, we can hardly afford that kind of scheme, I'm afraid. And they have also very concrete support schemes. If I can take one example, which is the Bioenergy CCS, which is one key way to go negative in terms of emissions, and they have we are discussing the certification in Europe, but they have implemented now concrete support schemes that covers $95 per ton CO2 sequestered and stored in the US. Very concrete. And the third aspect is that they are definitely more protectionist. Somehow, we to be very clear, we might be a bit too naive sometimes, that we create a market for foreign companies, third countries outside Europe, while in the IEA it's absolutely not the case. They support companies and technologies coming from US companies, or where they have a lot of shares in the business, at least. So yeah, that's a tough fight that we have with the US now. Not to mention China, of course. So it's time to, with our limited financial resource, is really time to look strategically how we protect the companies, or we support companies that are based in Europe. Thank you.
Thanks, Jean-Marc. That's very clear, and also echoing the theme and the arguments that have been developed in this event. We do have flagships, so how to make sure that they can continue growing. Alexandra Magosha, you want to? Alexandra, okay, go ahead.
Yes, just reflecting on the IRA, indeed, our members who are based in Europe are also looking across the pond and thinking that the IRA offers quite a lot of opportunities for them to grow and develop innovative projects, including cogeneration. The insights that we got is that what works better when it comes to the IRA is that the high-level principles are set, so very ambitious objectives are put forward, and then there's as a solution provider, you can, if you fit in those criteria, then you can put forward your projects. So there's a much broader framework for what is considered a decarbonizing solution or a net zero solution. They're not micromanaging that much. and they're not prioritizing to the very last detail what should be promoted versus what shouldn't be promoted. So this approach is perceived as much more conducive to investments by industry than this obsession almost with which technology and which are the criteria for each technology and so on, which can create a lot of barriers and waste the time of solution providers, basically. So that's really one insight that we got from our members, and it's really a recommendation for the ENZA.
Thanks, Alexandra. If there are no more comments on this aspect, I would like to take a question from the audience. It's a little bit long, so I invite maybe our panelists to open the questions from Stefan Abrecht, just to read it together. So Stefan says, all the technology presented are decentralized in terms of both generation and consumption. However, big players that are recognized in policy are typically centralized organizations such as large utilities or countries with greater renewable energy potential that offer simple one-stop shop solutions such as hydrogen. How do you plan to change these mindsets among policymakers to focus more on sustainable, owned renewable resources and energy system resilience, even if these solutions are more complex? Interesting question. Yes, Jean-Marc, give it a shot.
Yeah. Yeah, this is an excellent question. We face this problem as well as a Bioenergy in the Bioenergy sector, because we are really a decentralized solutions. Biomass is present in more or less every country, but really in a decentralized way. And the European Commission and Europe in general, they like centralized solutions and the silver bullet for the decarbonisation, which is not necessarily in line with the local project. So how do we change this? It also refers to the first question in this Q&A by Mr. Bernier. Why Bioenergy Europe is not listed in the ENZA? In the ENZA, I think we need more education at the EU level on all these different solutions. And especially in the Bioenergy sector, the way to manage our forest in a multifunctional way is not that easy to explain, and there are too many emotional messages for our sector. The forest owners are completely upset as well about this, and this goes to more communication, visits to plants, videos to show them the reality on the ground, education, explanation of the policymakers that decentralized way, even with small actors, small SMEs, is also a solution together with the large-scale centralized solution. But education is key for me.
Thanks, Jean-Marc. Anyone from our panelists wants to chip into this question? Magosha, yes, go
Maybe
ahead.
I'm going to come with a more positive perspective on things, because in the legislation we already see some rays of hope when it comes to this more decentralized approach, when we look more into energy system integration. If you look, maybe there are small things, but still it's going to help if you looked at the Energy Efficiency Directive, and when they are encouraged municipalities to map their needs, heating needs and heating system. This is going to enable companies, industrial sites to also participate in a more efficient way in energy system. And if you look at the electricity market design, there is also a big chapter on energy sharing and putting criteria there, how you can encourage sharing electricity between different players without really going through the grid. So it might not be a game changer, but we already see in policy some rays of hope that this more decentralized approach is being recognized.
Thanks for this positive note, and I guess as European Power, we would totally concur to support your positive view. Yes, Pedro, you want to add something?
Yes, I agree, Margosha, that there are positive signs. So we have seen also for the European level more measures looking to decentralized generation, the combination of supply and demand, and so on. We and measures on renewable heat, which are also contributing largely for member states to take a stronger action on renewable heat. We have a huge challenge, which is capacity building. And there is an important reason for this, which I think is understandable. It's just how things are, but we need to change the way things are. The reason is that electricity or gas markets are European markets or regulated at the European level as common markets, and the EU and national member states have competences regarding this. So it means that they have the capacity in terms of experts, in terms of the tools also to act on this. Renewable heat is a decentralized issue. And the main question that came also in the decentralized was very much related to the heat part of it. Renewable heat is decentralized. So, but the ones closer to these local authorities do not have the competences, but also do not have the resources in terms of technical experts and so on to address the topic. Therefore, the divide I mentioned earlier between the local and the national level. So it's a matter of also capacity building. We need more experts on at the local level. We need them to interact with experts on decentralized solutions, also including renewable heat or heat in general at national level. Then we also, so capacity building is one aspect. The other one I would refer is to the urgency of the energy transition and the need for resilience. So clearly, if we want a strong energy system, we need centralized solutions, but we also need decentralized solutions. We need to have solutions in terms of power supply, in terms of heat supply. So we need to make them work together in the best way, bringing resilience to the system, and having a variety of solutions. It's a basic principle also for companies. You cannot depend too much on one supplier. You cannot depend too much on one client. We did a huge mistake of EU, that as a bloc, we were too dependent on one supplier. So we need to learn from this mistake, because any student will tell you on management, economics or something, that this is a basic mistake to be done, but we have done it, and we cannot fall into these kind of mistakes again. So we need to look into a variety of solutions, and we have to look into the possibilities to deploy them fast. And we have these solutions. These technologies we have available are in the market today. As an example, in our sector, we are looking to our members. We can, within weeks, months, triple our capacity by increasing the number of shifts in terms of manufacturing, or reactivating some idle capacity. And if we want to grow our overall manufacturing capacity, depending on the technologies, we are talking about periods of 6 to 18 months to have new production lines in place and so on. So we have solutions that can deliver fast. And when we talk about our carbon targets, often we look into the future, into the last decade. But it's not only about being carbon neutral by 2050, we are managing a carbon budget. So we need to be within this carbon budget. So it doesn't matter if we get carbon neutral by 2050, if we do it in 2049, which is not feasible. But what I mean is we need to respect our carbon budget. We need to reduce our emissions faster, and we have solutions, and we need to activate the solutions we have to do that. So capacity building on one side, variety, and respecting our carbon budget.
Thanks, Pedro. I see that the time is running fast. So I would like perhaps to come to some closing remarks. We know that negotiations are ongoing within the institutions. In particular, I was saying within the ITRE committee, member will already start working on compromise amendments. So I would like to ask you two short questions, maybe with short answers as well. So first, do you have any recommendation for the upcoming or the ongoing negotiation within the Parliament and Council, or later for the trilogues? So that's number one. And then thinking a little bit more ahead, what is your ask for the next political mandate in terms of industrial policy? So one or two short sentences so we can give our audience some takeaways. Who wants to start? Alexandra, go. Oh, sorry.
Alexandra, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. So very briefly, and maybe I'll answer the two questions in one answer. We do need ambitious objectives for rapid decarbonization, as Pedro has just mentioned. We shouldn't only care about reaching net zero, but also how we reach it. So we need, as soon as possible, to deliver emission reductions through the technologies that we have, as well as through more innovative technologies. So for ENZA, we actually want to, of course, promote the growth of capacity for new technologies, but we also want to retain manufacturing that is already established in Europe, like cogeneration, like district heating, like bioenergy. So we want to retain those sectors in Europe so that they continue providing value and continue delivering important decarbonization projects for end users. So we need visibility for those technologies and solutions as well, not only for the newcomers to the net zero family, I would say. And then we also need to focus on the end users of those technologies that will create a market and that will generate demand for net zero solutions. And we must consider them as multipliers in this whole environment. So that's it for me.
Thanks, Alexandra. Good summary. I don't know if we still have to add to that, but we will try. Małgosia, you're next.
Well, first of all, when it comes to the negotiations, keep it simple, and please do take the value chain approach and include end users so they can benefit from the same incentives as those producing technologies to create a market for the deployment. And when it comes to the next mandate, this is the reflection that we've started already in CEPI. And I think that's something that resonates very well with us is this more decentralized, integrated approach. When we look at the energy system, when we look at electricity, when we look at heat, we need to make sure that we have the infrastructure that can handle those new capacities, that is designed for more flexibility in the system that our industry can provide. It is all about making sure that we innovate but it's not innovation for innovation's sake. It's innovation that can be deployed in the industry. So better link between the research and industry as well, and looking at those elements. And all actions that make sure that are going to provide our industry with fossil-free electricity, with fossil-free heat. This is something that we would like the Commission to have a better look at when it comes to looking at the 2040 target. This is just around the corner. We're going to see another communication coming up next year, and then the new political cycle, the new proposal are going to follow.
Thanks a lot, Margosha. Pedro or Jean-Marc? Jean-Marc,
yeah, I can go for it. Yeah, very quick. So for the ongoing negotiations, I think they should obviously continue and finalize this ENZA. This is an excellent proposal. It's an excellent base to promote our European companies. They need common sense and to include, to be inclusive enough for all technologies. We said that before. For the next mandate, we promote this for a while, but I think we really need a real fossil fuel exit strategy, not only promote renewables, but also making it clear for the energy users that we are coming to an end of the fossil fuels. There are too much inertia in the system. We are approaching 2050, as you just said. So now it's time to also have a quota, a limit, no permits anymore for new fossil fuel plants. The CO2 emissions are coming from fossil fuels. Everybody knows that. So let's cut fossil fuels and be clear. There should be obligations, no advertisement anymore, and little by little we have to prepare our society and our industries to the end of fossil fuels. It has to be much more clear than today. Now the policymakers are a bit afraid. It's a bit touchy because it has an impact, of course, on the economy and so on. That has to be prepared in advance. It will not come overnight. So for us, the courage to go for fossil fuel exit strategy is essential if we are really serious about the net zero in 2050. Thank you.
Thank you, Jean-Marc. Last but not least, Pedro.
Thank you, Pauline, and to all the others. So I take a bit from what the others are saying, and starting with the positive note that Jean-Marc was giving. So this is a good proposal. So this is an important proposal, which obviously can be improved. So the question is in which aspects should that improvement be focused? It's a piece of the puzzle. So we're looking into the European Green Deal as a bigger picture, and ENZA needs to be part of that. Also, as Jean-Marc was also referring on this exit strategy. So it's part of it. We're creating value in Europe. We're creating jobs. So that is essential. That can make Europe as a whole most competitive. There are questions to be addressed. So some of the aspects in terms of the barriers for investment, of the obstacles that usually investments face. So some are addressed, like questions like permitting, but the access to financing is one of them. And again, bringing SMEs into the equation, we don't have the same context we had a year or 2 years ago in terms of financing. So that is a bigger issue today, interest rates and so on. But there are other aspects in terms of financing instruments that are important, and the national implementation is important, but we need the EU financing so that this is not depending on the capacity of the country, so that we have a more homogeneous approach to EU and not only giving let's say, more leverage to the fiscal strong countries. So therefore we need EU financing being directed. I think we cannot talk of the levels of IRA, but we need something more substantial than what we currently have. And in terms of the message for the future, it has to be looking into the different solutions to make the energy transition viable and to increase resilience in Europe. And from our perspective, heating and cooling is critical for this. And we think we need to recenter the debate around the heating and cooling needs, together with the discussion we have on electrification and so on, to put also the different solutions together, which is also what ENZA does, is to look at the context and the different solutions available and how they can work together. And from our side, one of the things we are asking the Commission is to have a heating and cooling strategy, a new heating and cooling strategy that can look into how to address the change, the transition on what is 50% of the energy demand.
Thanks a lot. Actually, a lot of key takeaways here, but the time has come for us to close this discussion. That will be continued from the ENZA side, but also, of course, during the negotiations within the institutions. I would like to warmly thank our panelists for coming here today and proposing their views, and also our audience. I hope you enjoyed the webinar, and I wish you a good rest of the day, and we will see each other around. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.